Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Infante, joined as always by Adam H. Beasley. And Adam, the Dolphins destroyed the Commanders on Sunday, as you expected, to improve to 9-3 for the first time since 2001, which was the year after their last playoff win. They would not win a playoff game that year. But Adam, where were you in December of 2001?
Oh, okay. Well, old already. So that's the answer. I was into my career, already looking for my second full-time job because I had had enough of living in West Texas, which is where I spent the first 7 years of my post-graduation life. And I was about to get a job in Northern Virginia, move back to the Mid-Atlantic. So old, that's the answer. You were probably like 6 at that point, right?
No, I was a senior in high school.
Oh, all right.
I was a senior in high school.
You know what's crazy, sir? There are members of our staff that were not alive then.
I know. We were talking about this, and our fantasy football director, Kyle Yates, was like, I was 8. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, we had to explain to some of these people, like, who some of the luminaries of the early 2000s were, because simply they just either weren't alive or can't remember.
Yeah. Okay. But before I feel too old, let's talk about, the future and what's to come. And I want to, we can talk about what the Dolphins did to the Commanders, which is illegal in many states, I believe, with how that was. But I think really what it means for the AFC, for the Dolphins. And let me ask you this question before we get into the playoffs. I just want to ask you a generic question. Are the Dolphins the best team in the AFC?
Yeah.
This doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get the 1 seed. We'll talk about that. But you think they're the best team in the AFC?
Yes.
See, okay. I'm
sure.
glad you answered like that.
Sure.
It's interesting, right? To me, it's between the Ravens and Dolphins, and
Sure.
they're going to play, lovely, and New Year's Eve, and we'll get an answer there. But when you look at what they do, there's only 2 teams in the AFC that are in the top 7 in most major offense and defensive categories, and it's the Dolphins and Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
For the Dolphins, they have a better offense than the Ravens in these metrics: EPA per play on offense, yards per play, yards per game. The Ravens have they come up better on those defensive metrics, which is, EPA per play on defense, yards per play allowed, yards per game allowed. So it's really, and then the Chiefs and Jaguars both fall. The Jaguars are in the teens for a lot of these ratings, and that will get worse if Trevor Lawrence's injury is prolonged and he's out a while. The Chiefs, I don't know what to make of them. Do you, after falling to Jordan Love, where do you put the Chiefs in this? Are you worried about the Chiefs if the Dolphins have to, host the Chiefs in a playoff game? Is that a concern?
I mean, they can lose to any of these teams, so yeah, it won't be like we're experiencing now, which every week you're not worried because they're gonna blow the doors off the Titans like they blew the doors off the Commanders, like they blew the doors off the Jets. It's what we're gonna see this week is going to be very familiar, and then we're gonna get a much better feel for what this team truly is, because I think those losses they had earlier in the season, certainly the Bills loss you mentioned, was their worst showing by far of the year. You lose by 4 scores. It's a bad day. Did not have Jalen Ramsey in that game, right? And that defense was still figuring out what Vic Fangio wanted them to do. So I don't throw out that result because, look, they're going to have to overcome those demons in week 18 potentially to get that 1 seed. So you can't just, that game didn't count. Obviously, the Dolphins are a much different team than they were then. You mentioned all those metrics since week 8, and that's when Jalen Ramsey was inserted in the lineup. Number one defense in EPA per play, number 1 defense in dropback EPA. Their scoring average has just gotten so much better. They are a different, better team. However, I mean, last week was fantastic, but over that same time period, the offense was not as good, right? The offense has not been as good in the last 5 games as it was in its first 7, or whichever way you want to break it down. The offense has kind of fallen off a bit. Still the top 10 offense. Let's not kid ourselves. This is still an offense that 90% of the league would love to have. But yeah, it's not quite the same. The Ravens have just kind of been chugging along, right? I mean, they haven't had these huge peaks and valleys, and you go look at their schedule. They don't have any bad losses, right? I mean, they have some really good wins too. They completely annihilated the Lions. That is one of the more impressive wins of the year. I think that's just as impressive as 70-20. Like, I think that's a really, really good win for the Ravens. And so it's a coin flip, and that's why I don't have a ton of conviction. I will say this though. I think the Dolphins, and I wrote this, are the more complete team. I think they are the team from 1 to 53 that has the better roster, that has the better team, and that when they play to their potential would win that game. My concern is they still do those things. I mean, last week was a clean game for them, first time in a long time, no turnovers. Tua played much, much better. Good. Let's build on that, because if you give that Ravens defense 2 turnovers, you're probably going to lose that game. And so to me, that's the concern. I think if both teams play their A game, the Dolphins win because they're a better team. I think with the Dolphins' tendency to kind of, screw up, for lack of a better term, in those big showcase games, that's why I can't say for sure that they're the better team, but they are the more complete team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And it's interesting. I feel like the Ravens go overlooked nationally for whatever reason. But would you be surprised if I told you that their points per game differential is actually higher than the Dolphins?
No,
It's like,
because I wrote the exact same stat.
there you go. Okay, well, maybe the listeners are surprised if they didn't read your piece. But I think it's interesting. We'll get to that point, in week 17 when we get there, and it'll be a great measuring stick. I mean, week 16, right? Christmas Eve against the Cowboys will be that first measuring stick.
Who's better?
But
Here's a fun question: who's better, the Cowboys or the Ravens?
don't the Cowboys suffer from the same thing the Dolphins suffer from, which is no marquee wins? Isn't that kind of their thing, right? I know they lost to the Eagles. I'm not a Cowboys schedule expert, but I don't think they've beaten any teams that are exceptionally good as well. So, I mean, someone compared the Dolphins as the AFC Cowboys. So, are they mirrors?
And I think that's fair. I think that's a fair comparison until they prove otherwise. But that's really good. That's a good Superman meme to have, right? I mean, that's really, really good. If you're arguably the second best team in the conference, which is probably first or second is where the Dolphins are. That's a great place to live, and that's certainly what the Cowboys are. I think it's the Niners and the Cowboys. We saw the Eagles get exposed in Week 13, and it's not a one-time deal. That defense, I think, has given up 76 points in the last 2 weeks. And now they have the Cowboys, who are flying high. I mean, that offense is really clicking. Dak Prescott is a legitimate MVP candidate. I think there are a lot of similarities, and I think there could be the Dolphins could do a lot worse than be compared to that team. So, are those championship teams? We're going to find out. And I think the pieces are there for both. I think the Dolphins and the Cowboys both have very talented defenses, and I think they both have explosive offenses. And it's going to be very interesting to watch, because neither of those teams have ever done anything, right? I think Dak Prescott, how many playoff wins does he have? Maybe one in his career. It's not like he has this bank of experience to draw from when he gets to the postseason. Tua has never been to the playoffs. Their appearance last year, he was obviously hurt. I think that comparison is fair, but I don't think it's pejorative. I think it's just the reality.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating about this year is this final 5 weeks. So many of the best teams in each conference play each other, and even cross conference, right? Because the Ravens play the Niners, Dolphins play the Cowboys, the Ravens and Jaguars still play, Dolphins and Ravens still play. So there's going to be a lot of teams kind of battling here for the top 3 seeds in each conference, making some of these late season games very interesting. And a lot of playoff scenarios very interesting in both conferences. We'll obviously just focus on the AFC here. You tweeted a very interesting scenario this week where the Dolphins could actually wrap up the AFC's top seed before week 18 against the Bills, where that game could mean nothing for the Dolphins. They could already have the 1 seed locked up. And it seems crazy. But then when I actually read your tweet, I was like, this could happen. It's the Bills beating the Chiefs this week. It's the Ravens beating the Jaguars in week 15 next week, and the Dolphins winning the next 4. And that's probably the part that is probably the more
The least likely?
Unlikely, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
winning the next
right.
4 means the Dolphins win at home against the Cowboys and then go into Baltimore and win. But it's certainly an interesting scenario that it probably isn't being talked about enough, that, they control their own destiny, but they might not even need week 18.
Right. And it opens so many. I mean, this is the fun time of the year because we know that Dolphins are making the playoffs. We know they're going to win their division. We don't know if they're going to get the first round bye, but I have a pretty strong sense that they're going to be at worst the 3 seed. I don't see them, particularly with you mentioned the Jaguars issues, falling before. And honestly, I think the Chiefs might be in a bit of trouble right now. I think that offense is in bad shape, and would not at all surprise me if Buffalo went in there and handed them a second straight loss at Arrowhead. That would not surprise me in the slightest. I think of that group, but here's the other X factor here, Matt, is that you see the Ravens schedule down the stretch. Holy moly. It is. It's the hardest, I believe. And I don't think it's particularly close. Yeah, you could get, I mean, it's crazy to say, but you get to a scenario in which you put some dirt on the Ravens in week 17, right? You guarantee them, being in the 4 seed because they've got just so many tough games coming up. But no, I do think it's crazy for us. I've been an observer of the Miami Dolphins for 15 years. You've been a fan even longer, to be talking about this. And it kind of shows you how jumbled the AFC is, that the Dolphins went into week 13. I think they were the 3 seed going into week 13. And they had no control of their own destiny. I think even if they won out, the best they would have been is 2. They would have jumped the Ravens, I believe, and they would have been 2s. Would have been their best case scenario. Now it's, could they not even have to play their starters against the Bills? Would you play your starters against the Bills if you already had the 1 seed wrapped up? Certainly you don't want to risk injury, but there's also a pretty long history of teams coasting into the playoffs, getting that week off and being flat as a tire in the divisional round. I don't know if Mike McDaniel wants to do that either.
Yeah, I mean, we'll save this for the New Year's Day pod, but certainly I think there's a case to be made to play the starters some, right, if that was the situation.
Yeah, I mean,
but I know what you're thinking, right? People are probably saying, well, what are the odds the Dolphins are going to win 4 in a row, right? They've already won 3 in a row. So are they really going to put together the 7-game win streak that includes some tough games towards the end of it to wrap up, week 18? So I started playing around with our PFN playoff predictor, where we can test, various simulations. And I said, okay, what if the Dolphins falter on Christmas Eve? Okay, they lose to the Cowboys. What does it look like for them to get the top seed? And really, it's just a matter of winning their other 4 games, so they have to knock off the Bills and Ravens, and then you would need 1 Chiefs loss. And that can be to the Bills, it can be to anyone. The Chiefs schedule is, the Chiefs have warts, but they also have an easy schedule besides the Bills, because they have the Bengals, Patriots, Raiders, Chargers. So you need them to lose 1 game, and then you can still get the AFC top seed by winning all of your remaining games for the Dolphins, except for the Cowboy game.
It just shows the value of winning conference games too.
Exactly. If the Dolphins beat the Cowboys and lose to the Ravens, things get a little dicier for the top seed, because you need that 1 more Chiefs loss. You also need the Ravens to lose 1 of their remaining games, and the Jaguars to lose 1 of their remaining games. The Jaguars could fall to the Ravens, for example. That would make the easy one, and the Ravens fall to the Niners. So it is possible, but that Raven game is the one you have circled on your calendar, is the one you don't want to drop. If you have to drop a New Year's Eve or a Christmas Eve game, obviously you'd rather fall in the non-conference game.
Are the Jags done with the Texans?
The Jags I have it here.
Because
they are. They have the Browns. They have the Ravens, Browns, Panthers, Titans, Bucks.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Ravens and Browns, and then they have the Panthers, Titans, and Bucks in some order. It's not necessarily that order, but
yeah,
that's not great. Now, they might not have Trevor Lawrence for an extended period. We don't know. Certainly they could. If they don't have him this week, they could fall to the Browns, and then there's your 1 Jaguars loss, and you can kind of,
I think what we're all just doing is, in different ways, saying the AFC kind of stinks, right? That there's no dominant team, And that if there's ever a year for the Dolphins to get hot, get the 1 seed, host throughout the playoffs, have teams come, by the way, where the Dolphins have won 17 of their last 19 games. You can start thinking about, telling your family that you're going to Vegas. Like, seriously. I mean, we could, you don't have to squint very hard to see that scenario. And it boggles my mind that people are undervaluing the Dolphins at this point. I think they're so hung up on the fact that they have not beaten one of these glamour teams that they've failed to realize that in their 9 wins, I think they've won by an average of a total of 167 points. Like, they're not winning games; they are bludgeoning teams, like completely unbridling them. And so that has to count for something as well. And I don't think. Look, you can ask me if I'm going to take the Dolphins against the Niners in the Super Bowl. I don't like that at all. That's not something that makes me real optimistic.
The Niners did lose to the Vikings. It's funny. Each of these teams have bad losses, except for one team, and that's the Dolphins.
Well, I will say
they don't have that bad loss.
I will say this, though. The Niners just took what we all thought was the best team in the National Football League and completely destroyed them in their home. Okay. Everybody can lose to teams, but when you have that body of, that data point, and you look at their metrics, I mean, their offense is better than the Dolphins' offense right now. Their defense is always very good. I mean, that's one thing they don't do is come from behind, right? That's one thing they can't do that I think the Dolphins could do is rally. But you don't need to be able to rally when you're just absolutely destroying teams from the opening kick. So if we're breaking down Super Bowl previews, I'm not nearly as optimistic, but I think at this point, this is going to sound crazy. I think anything but a conference championship game appearance is a disappointment for this Dolphins team. I think that they are just as good, if not better, than every single team in the AFC, and they just need to go out and win the games that they're supposed to win.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the point you said about not having to squint too hard to see the Dolphins, in Las Vegas, I'd imagine in Baltimore, similar conversation, because I think they see this as their window as well right now. So, which makes a New Year's Eve game even more intriguing. You mentioned the Niners. It's interesting. They would be the team I would least want to see if it was a Super Bowl matchup. I'd rather face the Eagles. But that got me thinking, you kind of mentioned to me as well, who would you rather face in round 1 if you're the Dolphins, right? And you're sitting here and you did not get the top seed, because there are a lot of scenarios where they won't get the top seed. But let's say they end up number 2 or 3. There's a long list of 7-5 and 6-6 teams all jumbled up there in the AFC. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Indy, Houston, right? 7-5. Denver, Cincinnati, Buffalo, 6-6. Buffalo.
And you can't even discount the 5-7 Chargers, to be honest. You can't.
Well, I think you can because of their head coach, but fine. Okay. We'll leave them in there for now until they implode at some point.
I mean, they have, okay. I'm looking at the ESPN projections, their FPI, I guess it is.
Yes.
And I'm going to run through these odds to make the postseason. Dolphins 99.5, Ravens 99, Chiefs 98, Jags 94.9, Texans, and here's where it starts to get interesting. Texans are 69.6, Browns 66.7. I think that's overvalued because their quarterback situation is their quarterback situation. Pittsburgh 55.6, Indy 55.5. Then there's another drop off. Buffalo 21, Chargers 14.6, Broncos 12.5, and the Bengals 12.4. So even the Bengals still have like a 1-8 chance to make the postseason. I don't know how much, the methodology behind this, how much they factor that in. But yeah, no, of that group, let's rank them. Which ones we would most like to see? Number 1 for you is what?
Most like to see in round 1.
Mm-hmm.
Give me Pittsburgh.
I would say Denver because they've already beaten them by 50.
Something makes me uneasy about the 50-point beating and the whole revenge thing and karma. And although the Dolphins did the right thing by not kicking that field goal, so maybe that, the football gods give them some grace there. But
yeah, so you took who, Cleveland or Pittsburgh? You took Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think
Pittsburgh.
that's perfectly fair. I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland are the same team. They have a dynamite edge rusher that keeps them in games, and they have a god awful offense. I think they are mirror images, and those teams hate each other. So it's funny that they're the identical team. So I
Yeah.
think you can make them 2A, 2B in my book, and you can probably make them 1A, 1B in yours. Who would you want third?
Probably Denver there.
Yeah. You know what? You know who's kind of a sneaky, concerning team? The Colts.
Cincinnati. Oh, okay. I was gonna say Cincinnati after what I just saw them do.
Well, yeah, no, that was interesting. Not as concerned about the longevity of Jake Browning as you are, perhaps. I don't know if that's something that's particularly sustainable, but they have weapons. The defense is feisty. I don't think it's particularly good this year, though, right? I mean, it's not the same defense as we saw the last 2 years. Maybe they get hot in December, but they have some injuries as well at the cornerback position. Um, you know, I would not. I would have a high degree of confidence them playing the Bengals.
Tell me why Houston. I mean, why Indy? Why Indy? That's what you had said.
I just think their offense is a lot better than people are giving them credit for. I think they're top 10 in EPA per play. I don't know a ton about their defense. That's probably not particularly stout, but it's good enough to keep them in games. Jonathan Taylor, if he comes back, he's kind of a horse. And every year there's just one weird team that you don't think can do something, and maybe they win a game or two. So I don't know. I'm not. Maybe it's just the unknown too. Like, how many Colts games have you watched? I have not watched a single down. I think of that
Not
team this year.
many. Not many.
Yeah. So have they been on national TV? I can't remember them on a Thursday night game. I
Good
can't.
question.
I can't remember seeing that team.
Hmm.
So maybe it's just the mystery for me. Maybe that's why. But
It could be. And you're right about the defense, by the way. 13th in EPA per play.
yeah,
That's a nice, above average unit there. Ranked ahead of the Bills, for example. Ranked ahead of the Patriots defense, which for all the Patriots' faults, the Patriots defense is good.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, certainly it's a unit, I suppose, that it's going to travel a bit in the playoffs there. The thing that worries me about the Colts would be I don't trust their quarterback. Okay, I don't. Again, he could also he's the kind of guy he could have a huge game, right? Or he could turn it over 4 times and be the reason. And against Miami secondary, I wouldn't be too concerned there.
All right, so let's assume the Jaguars win the division even with their injury issues. So that leaves the Chargers, which you've already dismissed out of hand. I think they're just because of what their upside is on offense, even though it's broken, just because their ability to score, points with that quarterback, if he gets hot and throws the ball down the field, I'm always gonna be a little bit worried. But my God, that defense is bad. I mean, it's not good at all. Although they just, shut out an NFL team. An NFL team.
I mean, a legend NFL team.
As I do air quotes here on camera,
Yeah.
that helped their statistical rankings for sure. But yeah, no, I'm not super worried about them. To be honest, it's Houston and Buffalo, right? Those are the two. Those are the two teams you do not want to see in a wild card round. Am I right?
100%. Houston's been fun to watch. From afar. I want no part of them in the first round. But I mentioned this to you before we started talking. The team I absolutely want no part of it would be Buffalo. And I know there's a subset of Dolphins fans on social media that want to write off the Bills. I refuse to do it because
that's wishful thinking. That's
right.
all that is.
We know how good they can be if they don't on offense, at least if they don't turn the ball over. And I want no part of that in round one. Not to mention back-to-back weeks, right? Having to play the Bills week 18 and then a wild card weekend. No. I would be uncomfortable.
So the website that does EPA per play has their team tiers, and they do like the diagonal XY axis, and they tell you who's where. And between cumulative EPA of offense and defense, the Bills are closer to the Dolphins than the Dolphins are to the Niners, and that should tell you all you need to know, right?
And the Bills are closer than the Chiefs are as well.
Yep, and that's why
and the Jaguars.
I think, and I think you told me you wouldn't be surprised if they go in an Arrowhead and win.
Yep.
So what would you do then? Like, okay, here's the fun one. You're locked into the 2 seed. would you play hard in week 18, risk your starters to make sure you don't have to beat the Bills in an elimination game? That's the fun one.
That's a good question. I thought you were going to say, would you? Well, no, okay, no, right. So if they're locked into the two, I would play. I would play hard. I would play the whole game. I would, play it off to the media as we're just, making sure we're ready for wild card weekend. We're not going to, rest our starters to come out flat and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would play to win. It's also a competitive thing, right? A competitive balance kind of thing where doing the right thing for the league by not rolling over for a team.
Oh, I don't give a crap about that. I don't care about that one bit. Like, seriously, no, the league doesn't care about you. Why should you care about them? Right? I mean, every single one of those teams will put dirt on you if it means they got to get one step closer to the Super Bowl. So,
okay. I'm just saying McDaniel could, if he's asked about why he's playing his starters, that could be something he goes with as well.
He lies about.
Yeah, right. He lies about. I mean, what's he going to say? We don't want to play the Bills next week, so we're going to go knock them out now.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's right. I would.
How upset would your stomach be if they lose that Week 18 game?
I would be very nervous. That's the only team in round one that the Dolphins could face that I'd legitimately be concerned about. I almost half expecting a loss, to be honest, is because of how I'm wired as a lifelong Dolphin fan. Just expecting the worst in that case.
Well, I mean, they've owned, aside from a handful of games, they've owned the Dolphins over the last 10 years. Absolutely owned them. And they bludgeoned them. When was that? Week 3, week 4, whatever that was.
Yep. It was week 4. It was right after the 70-point explosion.
Correct.
What a correction there.
I think you would have a shook team if they tried hard and their first loss in a year and a half, or I guess not a year and a half, they did lose on Christmas Day last year, but third loss in 23 games or whatever it is at Hard Rock was the team that is your daddy. I mean, has been your daddy for a long time. And now you got to go beat your daddy to get to the divisional round of the playoffs. You'll learn a lot about the character of this team for sure. Probably not your easiest path to the Super Bowl, though. It's not really what you'd want to do if your end game is to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. Yeah, no.
You don't want to go Bills, Jaguars, Ravens, or Bills, Chiefs, Ravens to get to Vegas. That would be that's a tough run.
Well, I would also say that the Bills would be at worst the second hardest team of that run.
Yeah,
like I would like their divisional round matchups better than their first round matchups if that's the case. I would. We have one thing we have not seen though, Infante, is we have not seen this defense go up against Josh Allen with Jalen Ramsey. And
right.
If Steph Diggs certainly had a field day against Kader Kohu, that ain't going to happen again, right? That's not going to be the matchup that we're going to see in Week 18, assuming the Dolphins play. So that changes the dynamic for sure. But it just doesn't matter who the Dolphins have on defense, who's calling the plays on defense. Josh Allen seems to roast those guys. And he even had a solid, not a great game, but he had a solid game in the one that the Dolphins lost down here. I think he made 2 boneheaded plays, which is how they usually lose. He made 2 plays, including one, like he couldn't get a playoff on 4th down, I think, or no, the time was running out in the first half that cost them points, and that was the difference of the game, or that wouldn't have, I can't remember the specifics, but that I vaguely remember just a stupid Josh Allen play, not a turnover, but just a mistake that was consequential in that game. So even the one the Dolphins have, is that the only time the Dolphins have beaten the Bills since the Christmas Eve game in 2016? Is that the only time? I mean, it feels like it's been forever. I can't remember any other wins the Dolphins have had against Buffalo in that stretch.
Let me
I'm happy
see.
to look up things that I looked up before the show.
Yeah, no, but I have here. So 2018, they won 21-17 at home. It was a December game.
Do you remember that game at all?
I do not. 2018. So that was...
It was the end of the Adam Gase era.
Yes, it was. Ryan Tannehill had 3 touchdown passes, but 137 yards passing.
That's interesting.
And yeah, Josh Allen had 2 turnovers. Shocking. I don't remember this game at all. He also rushed for 135 yards to Josh Allen.
That's not a surprise.
No, it's not. But I do not remember this game. The Dolphins trailed in the fourth quarter. Kenny Stills had a 13-yard touchdown pass from Tannehill.
And
Boy, 2018 was only 5 years ago, and I can't remember.
was that the last game they won?
What, in that season?
Mm-hmm.
No, they were 6-6 there. They would beat the Patriots the following week and then lost 3 straight. Now I remember.
Yeah, the miracle game. That's what it was. Yep.
Yep.
And we all thought, hey, maybe they're going to go to the playoffs and Gase is going to save his job and all that.
Right. And then the Vikings trashed them by 25 points. The Jaguars beat them, and then they lost in Buffalo 42-17. I remember
the Jaguars were not good that year, if I remember correctly. That was a bad, like that's a fireable loss. When your season's on the line, you lose to that Jaguars team.
They were 4-10 entering that game. 4-10.
Yep.
Might have been the end. Was that Doug Marone's last year there?
Questions?
No,
I'm not prepared to answer.
No, he was there a couple more years.
Okay.
Anyway,
there is a history of late season swoons for the Miami Dolphins, but I assume you watched Hard Knocks last night.
Of course.
To me, one of the more revealing things is how much McDaniel leaned into that. Like some coaches will be like, "Get that out of your mind. It's not important to us." What happened last year is a totally different situation. He used that to focus the minds of his team, and that to me was an interesting development.
Yeah, no, that stuck out right away. It was one of the opening scenes there. He brought up the whole December thing, and it's funny because when you think back of last year, the December losses kind of get jumbled up with Tua's injuries, but he was there in December. He was healthy until the Green Bay game where he may have played concussed, but
not may have.
He was healthy playing.
Yeah, the team acknowledges that he played concussed. Yeah, he played concussed.
Right.
And second half was a different game for him. The first half, so you wonder when that injury occurred. But to me, that stretch is the only other time I've had that concern was a little bit like the stretch that we just went through. Concern about the offense. When Tua, obviously when Tua doesn't play, the offense is a dumpster fire. We know that. But when he does, they're usually very competitive. And that was the idea, what the Niners and the Chargers got, revealed the blueprint of how you beat them. Although the third game in that 5-game losing streak, they lit up the Bills. I mean, their offense was excellent in that Buffalo game.
Yep. In the snow.
Yeah, they lost. They lost in no small part because fans were pelting the Dolphins receivers with snowballs in the end zone. I mean, literally, that was a contributing factor to that loss because I think Tyreek dropped a touchdown, I believe, because he was getting lit up by snowballs. So, again, another reason you want the home field advantage, so you don't have to do that. You can make these guys roast in the sun instead. But yeah, no, there are reasons that Dolphins fans like you have scar tissue, right? I mean, it's legitimate. It's not not a phobia, man. It's real. It's a real dynamic with this team. Is that relevant to this year's team, Matt?
Yeah, I guess we're going to find out. I like the fact the way McDaniel attacks these things head on, right? He attacked the December thing. I wonder if we'll see a little insight if Week 18 means something for the Dolphins. I'd be curious to see if past games against the Bills comes up, in those team meetings if they show that on Hard Knocks. But certainly he seems to embrace where they failed in the past, right, and try to turn that into a positive for them.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I admire about him. I could not imagine Joe Philbin doing the same thing. You know, he's all processed one at a time, droll, falling asleep as he's talking to you in the meeting room. You do not fall asleep when Mike McDaniel is talking to you. You might laugh, but you're not going to fall asleep. What else has been kind of revealing to you from Hard Knocks as we kind of put a bow on this? Because we don't want to talk about the Tennessee Titans one bit, by the way.
Oh, come on. Let's talk about the Titans. No, let's not. No, I think the biggest thing for me is kind of how the relationship between Tua and McDaniel. You hear about it, we've heard them talk about their relationship, and then you see clips and like the when they're mic'd up and stuff. But it's a bit more revealing to see the way they interact in practice and whatnot. I think that's been interesting. And then also the way, Tyreek's personality, because, put his reputation aside, I never really embraced him as a Dolphin beyond just what he does on the field. But, seeing the way he interacts with his teammates, beyond just his production. and the way he carries himself, in that team, I think it speaks a lot. That was kind of revealing to me in these first couple episodes.
I think that's absolutely right. I kind of wrote about that last night when I did a recap of the show. To me, it's funny not to reveal confidences, but betray confidences, but there are those that may cover the Miami Dolphins that think the season hasn't as exciting as it should be. That Hard Knocks, that is. And my response was NFL Films is kind of working with what they're working with. The biggest drama, obviously, we've had in the last 3 weeks is the Jalen Phillips injury. I think they did a fantastic job with that. But beyond that, there's no drama. Right? This is a drama-free stretch for them. It could change in 2 weeks for sure, or it could change on Monday if they lay an egg against the Titans. But it's not like you're not seeing this conflict that makes a lot of these reality television shows go. The quarterback was excellent because you saw Marcus Mariota's dreams end, right? That was a fantastic access. I'm sure he regrets doing it at this point, but that was incredible access. You saw the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl. That was amazing. And you saw Kirk Cousins come up short in the playoffs yet again. All these things that are narratives, you saw the access to. There's not really much narrative about them beating the hell out of the Commanders, right? It just isn't. Yeah. So what I think it has shown me, the show has shown me more than anything, is that this team truly is, and I've gotten the sense covering them this year, but it's a bunch of pretty good dudes, man. They're genuinely good people that we cover, and the stars don't act like it. Right? Tyreek is a showman. There's no doubt about that. But he's not the diva type of wide receivers you're going to see in some other places. Steph Diggs would be a totally different ball of wax, I think, if you would have him mic'd up for a season than Tyreek Hill. And I think it just shows that this is a group that actually likes each other. That it's not, and they celebrate each other's, success. And they love having fun. McDaniel was saying, let's go have fun. Now, it's a lot easier to have fun when you're about to go beat the hell out of the Commanders than it is when, you got the Cowboys in town. But still, I think this is a joyful team. And I think NFL Film has done an excellent job of portraying that because it's what the reality is. Now, again, that could absolutely change. But for a snapshot in time, I think it's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other thing that stuck out to me was Jalen Ramsey as well, another superstar that doesn't carry himself like a superstar amongst his peers, and how he's been embraced by that team. And we saw him celebrating the Van Ginkel interception, and they celebrate each other's successes. And it's the kind of team that I hope it's easy to root for. Is other people who don't care about the Dolphins and maybe they're a fan of an NFC team. So they don't really have anything negative about the Dolphins or a reason to root against them, can find the reason to want to root for them because they are very likable. And there are some people that may never like Tua for reasons to remain unknown and never understand why. But he comes across as genuine and likable, human, as you can, as we all expected. And a bunch of these guys did as well. And if this keeps up, it's going to be an easy team to root for as they go into the playoff run.
And we have broken down all those playoff matchups. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, Matthew. The one thing I've missed from you today is none of your, liners, your readers, your ad reads. You got any of those for us today? Because you do such a fantastic job of that.
Well, I'm glad you asked because, holidays are coming up. Hanukkah starts this week. Yeah, right. We got Christmas in 19 days. And did you know we have a PFN merch shop? And if you go to pfnmerch.com, you can get all kinds of team related, team adjacent products. There are a lot of Dolphins themed shirts, Tua themed shirts, ugly Christmas sweaters, things like that at the shop. That is pfnmerch.com. There is a promo going on too. So when you go there, you can find the promo code, put it in, save some money, and buy some gifts for your football friends and family.
Smooth as eggnog, my friend. You are smooth as eggnog.
Thank you. So let's get out of here with one final bit. The Titans. How much? No. How much do you think the Dolphins win by? That's all. We don't have to break it down. We don't have to break down Will Levis. I wish it was Tannehill. Just personally, it would have been a better story to have him back at Hard Rock. But
obviously, Jeffrey Simmons not playing. Is that correct?
Has he been officially ruled out?
If not, I think it's highly, highly unlikely.
Right.
And if Derrick Henry does play, it's going to be a diminished Derrick Henry because
Yep.
he is banged up as well. Not great when you're an overmatched team going into a big game against a very talented team without your two best players at full strength. I mean, maybe Levis does some crazy things to keep them in the game. I think the higher likelihood is he throws a bunch of picks, right? I think this, you could have some rookie lumps taken this week. Titans defense is BAD bad. I mean, it's not a good defense. This to me could feel a lot like the Jets game. Like the Commanders, you had a sense that, if you made a couple of mistakes, you saw in Hard Knocks, they were concerned about the explosiveness of that offense. Not much explosive about the Titans offense. And if you're asking me for a prediction.
Well, let me say the spread was 13 when I looked this morning. Yeah, I know it's big. The Dolphins covered that.
How long do the starters play?
I think you would see similar to the Commanders, right? They'll go into the fourth.
Yeah.
Although it is a short week then. So, I mean, maybe they pull them sooner. I don't know.
I would love to see Tua go back-to-back games without turning the ball over. That'd be a good step forward.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would probably bet the Dolphins to cover. I think you're looking at something like 34-10 probably is my guess.
Yeah, I was right around that. I was thinking like a 30-13 kind of game. I would lay the points if I was betting on it. I tend not to bet on the Dolphins because I've been broken too many times by that. But certainly, I think that's the play.
What you got to do is bet against the Dolphins every week. That way, you're a winner, win or lose.
I know a lot of people that bet against their favorite teams. Really, more so just in the playoffs. So the exit from the playoffs is easier to swallow because you want some money. I haven't had to worry about that for much of my legalized betting life. So I'll think that strategy up this year and see when we get into January.
I look forward to, was it Matty I Bets at Matty I Bets?
No, it is at Infante Bets. Although that account's been dormant for a while. It'll pick back up for, college baseball season.
You love college baseball. You absolutely love college baseball.
I
might start telling you. I really might.
No, if you're looking for something to bet on that isn't as sharp because it's just not as popular, and so the books don't put that much time into it, that's the sport. Until they get into the College World Series. Then I stop because all of a sudden it's getting all its attention and the lines are much, much more difficult. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a fun talk.
Betting advice.
I like doing this. Should we do this again next week?
You know what? Let's do that. All right. And we will see you back here next week. All of our Dolphins coverage is on profootballnetwork.com/Miami-Dolphins. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, what are you waiting for? All right, go ahead and do it. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe as well. And we will see you back here next week on the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast.